I'm going to jump right into this because we've got a lot to cover. I'll try to talk fast and keep moving. If it's too fast or slow, YouTube has settings in the video pane that will let you speed me up or slow me down. This video is primarily aimed at first-time or newer gun owners, but I guarantee everyone could learn something from all this has to offer. So what is this? This is a data-driven approach to identify the best firearm for home defense, why it is the best, and how it came to be the best. This should help guide your spending, as well as help you understand why you are buying whatever you may eventually pick. It's not anecdotal, well, my friend who is a cop said, or I was in the military for 4 years, so I know everything. It won't be brief. It'll change as technology and time progress, but it should lay the groundwork for you to understand the direction things are going, and it should hold value in the future for that reason. This isn't expert testimony, so why should you listen? More people need to ask this question when consuming content. Most important here is my skill set. I'm professionally a data analyst for a Fortune 500 company. My whole career has revolved around this type of work, and I use mass data pulls here to help get some answers. As far as shooting goes, I have a little over 10 years experience at the making of this video. I started off with a 12 gauge semi for trap, skeet, and sporting clays, carry concealed everywhere it's legal, and I've taken the course 3 times in 2 different states. I've never formally competed, but I've shot numerous IDPA matches. Of course, I've put thousands of rounds down flat ranges, as we all have. Though extremely slight, I've done a little Muay Thai boxing and beat JJ as well. So more important than me is that shooting is my passion. The data you're about to receive is not just from hard numbers, of which there are going to be plenty, but also from literally thousands of hours watching true experts like those listed here. If you're looking to gain more information, these are the sources I trust. So let's start here. If we're going to use a gun, who are the experts we should look to for advice? All those listed here are great with firearms, but use them for different purposes. For home defense, we're going to face an armed target, likely within 30 yards, that has surprised us. Our life is going to be on the line, so we want the best tool legally available to stop the threat quickly, accurately, and reliably. Competitors have speed, accuracy, and the ranges we're looking for, but they have different rules, face targets that can't shoot back, and don't have anything to lose. Police are closer in almost every way, except that they've got to face the public. This means, except in extreme situations, they're typically going to be limited to a handgun. They also have to face department policies, like attempting to use less than lethal options, and they have different requirements getting in and out of cars and offices all day than you might just staying in your home. So that kind of leaves us with military. They're facing armed threats at all ranges, sometimes by ambush, where life is at stake, without limits really, other than like the Geneva Convention or, other rules of warfare, rules of engagement. So here come the numbers. What does the military use? These are the top 20 militaries listed by current size. Every single one issues a rifle as the primary weapon. This in the slides to come will irk some people who are going to notice that I put M16 up there and say that we aren't using that, but we're using the M4 or some other variant. I'm just listing patterns here, patterns of the initial design. So unless a truly massive change has been made, I'm not going to change that name. So aside from military size, are there any other patterns? Surprisingly few. Each nation seems to field its own rifle. However, slightly highlighted, you can see the M16 M4 pattern rifle has been adopted by multiple countries, as has the AK pattern, as well as the AUG. So why the rifle? I found, and I'm going to quote a whole lot in this report, this awesome declassified report by the Operations Research Office called Operational Requirements for an Infantry Hand Weapon. It details that the rifle is the most lethal of all conventional ground arms, with a one-shot stop rate of 30% at all ranges. So here are the same top 20 countries, this time showing the main issue rifle by year. There's some color shading here to show you when they change over and make that a little more obvious. You can see which countries are changing faster and slower than others, and you can note their reputation. Like Switzerland, for instance, though they have a small army, has a great reputation for firearms manufacture, and you can see they frequently change, whereas something like Russia almost never changes. Please excuse examples like Saudi Arabia, where I couldn't find data I trusted far enough back in the past, or like North or South Korea, which didn't exist before the Korean War. Pause the video, go back if I move too quickly and you want to look at this more closely. What that chart showed us is simplified here. As time moves across the x-axis, you can see the average year a rifle entered service increases on the y-axis. So it seems obvious that as time goes on, technology improves and militaries update, but think about it. The current M4 M16 pattern was actually designed in 1956. It's a 64-year-old design. That makes the AK a 74-year-old design. So clearly we aren't updating our rifles as quickly as we might. So what made us update in the past? Well, those were features that were too good to be ignored. So in the beginning, everyone was using basically the same 5-shot bolt-action large caliber rifle. But with World War II, the M1 Garand introduced an 8-shot semi-auto rifle. Effectively, this allows 2.4 times the fire rate with a 1.6 times larger magazine. To me, it speaks volumes that you can see here. Japan and Italy adopted the M1 as the standard issue rifle for a time after World War War II. So despite all the hatred and bitterness left over from a very recent war, the design was too good to ignore, and they adopted the rifle as their main battle rifle. Semi-autos were actually short-lived. The ORO report I quoted earlier said the only hand weapon more effective than the rifle is the machine gun, simply due to volume of fire. So they were kind of thinking, if semi's good, why wouldn't full auto be better? And they moved directly to that. It actually isn't better, so we'll get to that later, as will the report, but the standard issue wanted that option anyways. So here are a few more views of the bolt action to full auto timeline, and you can see it's really striking how quickly this occurred. So on the top, we see bolt guns in black, semis in dark gray, and full auto in light gray as a percentage each year. Below, we see the fire rate in rounds per minute each year. Interesting to look at is that curve. We have this initial explosion as everyone converts from 1946 to 1966, but then the fire rate flattens out until around 1975. Why? Well, caliber. The right arm of the free world came into being. NATO had everyone using the FAL, everyone except the US, who was still enamored with the M1 and rebuilt it as the M14. Look how many countries are using the FAL all at once. Keep in mind, this was a 7.62 by 51 NATO cartridge, very large rifle round, coming out full auto. It was uncontrollable even with training, so there was no need to increase the fire rate any further. Auto guns made hungry guns, so when we put the magazine capacity trend right next to the fire rate, they almost perfectly mirror each other. Magazine's a little bit slower, but I mean, lockstep. So now things get interesting. More ammo means more weight. Higher fire rate means more heat. Heat and bulkier, stronger guns to cope with all the stress. But for a soldier in the field, weight sucks. The phrase I've always heard is ounces make pounds, pounds make pain. Rifles have gone from 8.8 pounds in World War II, I'm talking on average, up to 9.3 pounds. 8 ounces may sound small, but that's a 6% weight increase. So to this point, we know we have a heavy gun that is uncontrollable due to full auto fire of a powerful cartridge. Well, if we want to keep the full auto fire, we can kill two birds with one stone by reducing caliber. That makes for lighter weight guns that are more controllable to shoot. But the question is, can we actually drop caliber without consequence? Let's look at our realistic needs from a caliber starting with range. Back to the ORO report, battlefield visibility data show why combat fire is actually so limited in range by normal terrain obstructions to the line of sight as to rarely exceed 300 yards. The ranges at which rifle fire is used most frequently in battle do not exceed 300 yards. The marksmanship of even expert riflemen is satisfactory only up to 100 yards. Fully automatic hand weapons are valueless. So back to the full auto thing, don't worry a lot about that. All right, so a lot to unpack, and this is where people are going to start arguing and getting really, really mad. First, this says you will rarely ever be able to see a target past 300 yards. So that right there, stop. You can't hit what you can't see. We don't need a cartridge that's good to anything more than 300 yards. Next, you aren't as accurate as you think. Even the expert riflemen were only good to 100 yards. The best, fully trained, professional soldiers are only good to 100 yards. I'm going to harp on this a ton throughout this presentation, but you don't need a 1 MOA gun. For new shooters, this means a gun that can shoot a group of 1 inch or less at 100 yards. Any gun is more accurate than its shooter. It's one thing to shoot bench rest, perfect conditions, you're comfortable, it's a nice day outside, but it's another thing entirely to know your target will be shooting bad. I'm going to get personal for a minute here. This is not data driven. I can tell you from my IDPA experience that the pressure of a timer and just a few people watching you is enough to start forcing a lot of mistakes that you would not expect. Initially, from boxing, I can tell you that adrenaline will cause tunnel vision and will cause inability to think. You're just going to revert back to whatever you've trained most in your life. And if you haven't trained a lot, there's no telling what you're going to do. And those are small examples. None of us who haven't been through it can even imagine the feeling of being in a firefight. So get out of your armchair and stop thinking that a sub-MOA gun is any better than a 10 MOA gun in actual practical use. I've got more data that's going to prove this even better later. So back to the range thing. Of those cases studied, in almost all rifle bullet hits were received at rifle ranges of less than 75 yards. In Korea, the mean range for these hits was found to be just over 100 yards. In European actions, about 80% of effective fire takes place at less than 200 yards, 90% less than 300. Of 602 men questioned about Korea, 87% said that 95% of all firing was done at targets within 300 yard range. 80% said that rifles were used at 300 yards or less. So that's more just proving my point. Also, let's not forget our purpose here. For home defense, you're likely not going to shoot more than 30 yards. Again, I've got some numbers to provide on that one later. So this is just a graph in the report showing the percentage of usage over ranges. And if you just look at that curve, it drops off super steeply. The dashed line shows chances of even seeing a target, and the dotted line shows the defensive use of a rifle at range. So here's a snippet from where they did a topographical map study, taking 18,000 readings all over the world, and they found that in 70% of the ranges at which you can even see another human is only 300 yards. So they explicitly state the present design for incapacitating clothed personnel up to 1,200 yards could be reduced for maximum effectiveness up to 300 yards. So this explains a little bit more about the topographic study here, shows a chart with 3 terrain types, y-axis probability of seeing a target, x-axis distance. Again, we see a super steep drop off. So those high caliber, high recoil, heavy rounds are not going to be necessary. So enough theory for a minute. Look, here's a practical application for you that we can learn from all this. If you're not going to be shooting beyond 300 yards, you want to be most accurate between 0 and 300 yards. So to do this, you're going to need to select a 0. For the newer shooters out there, your sight, the device you're aiming with, actually sits several inches above the barrel of your gun. So if you want the bullet to go where you're aiming, you have to set a distance where the bullet rises enough from the barrel to intersect the line of your sights. Really what you're doing is making your sight aim low instead of parallel, but regardless, what goes up must come down. So your bullet will intersect your sights at 0, meaning the distance at which the drop or rise of the bullet is 0 inches, and then it's going to rise above your point of aim past that. Eventually, somewhere downrange, gravity will pull the bullet back down into your sight for a second and final time. Everything beyond that is going to be below your point of aim. Clear as mud? So let me help. In the US, most of us shoot 223, 5.56 NATO cartridge. So I picked just a standard round and ran ballistics for it at different zeros. So you can see the 25-yard zero, which a lot of people like because the military used it, is zeroed at 25 yards. It's also zeroed at 370 yards further downrange. That's where it will come back down. A 50-yard zero, favored by law enforcement, is zeroed at 50 and 215. And a 100-yard zero is basically 100. It's not exact, but it's pretty close. So I'm going to add some color here where green is more accurate and red is more off target to make this more clear. Okay, a little bit of an eyesore, I know. But if we look at the bottom chart there, standard deviation, spread between highest and lowest bullet, and total error, the quote-quote best overall zero for this cartridge from 0 to 300 yards is the 50-yard zero. But I wouldn't fault you for the 75 or the 100-yard zero. They do drop more at 300, but statistics show us the closer you get, the more likely you are to engage. And the 75 or 100-yard zero are more accurate closer in. I mainly show this to get people away from the 25-yard zero. This zero is meant for man-sized targets out to 500 yards. So statistically very unlikely, and good luck convincing a jury you were doing self-defense at 500 yards away. Same data, this time applied to a 5'10" silhouette. I figure that's about the average height of a person, of a military age male combatant anyways. So by 100 yards with the 25-yard zero, you're already 6 inches high. From 175 to 250, you're almost a foot off. And by 300, you're still 8 inches high. Here's another view showing the spread straight on, and you can see the largeness of the spread of the 25-yard group and how much tighter it gets when you get closer to the 50-yard spread. This one's interesting here. I now use the exact same chart, exact same data, but I correct the point of aim to the head. None of us should have the training or the time to take a headshot. This just shows how accurate the zero could be for smaller targets when you're plinking or out at the range. You should use your rifle and get good with it. Part of that is going to be having fun at the range, which you won't be doing if you're shooting 6 inches high because you picked a 25-yard zero. Again, let's bring it back home. In a home defense shooting, your range will likely be under 30 yards, and this is too close for your bullet to rise to your sight anyways. You could be as much as 3 inches low at these distances. So not significant, but just something to be aware of. Try and align it so that you have the most capability with your rifle at the most realistic ranges. Have fun, train, get good with it. So now back to the development of the rifle and what you want in it. Shorter ranges allow for smaller calibers. Smaller calibers allow for lighter weapons. So technology advances along with the lighter calibers to let us change rifle construction. Highlighted here when countries adopted weapons that were composite, plastic, or polymer rather than the old school wood and steel. Interesting here to note that the M14 didn't adopt this premise when the FAL and other nations did. This is definitely not the sole reason, but just look at how briefly the M14 was our chosen rifle compared to how long others kept the FAL. Keep in mind, the ORO report I've been referencing is from 1952, so though they understood a smaller caliber was needed, it would take some time to implement. These charts are interesting though. You've seen the weight one earlier, but below shows muzzle energy in black. This is the power a round has determined by the muzzle velocity as well as the weight of the bullet. You see the decline in muzzle energy almost directly follows the decline in weight. The two are tied. What is interesting to note, though, is available energy. This is a factor that I created taking into account muzzle energy, magazine size, and fire rate to create essentially how much energy the system is capable of sending downrange. So while the metric does decrease, it's a lot more flat than that raw muzzle energy. We're using larger caliber magazines and higher fire rate to offset the smaller caliber. The way this was done is also interesting. So same muzzle energy chart above, but below is bullet weight and bullet velocity by year. You see the trade? As we gave up bullet weight, we took on muzzle velocity. The current formula is muzzle energy equals bullet weight times velocity squared divided by 453. So the fact that velocity is squared gives it much more effect on energy than weight does. That's how the offset works. All right, so what's your evidence? First, I had to show again they're saying the full automatic feature is valueless. I'll grant that this was in reference to full caliber full auto, but what I want you to take away from this is that full auto isn't necessary. Anyways, it goes on to say say that ballisticians determined that the wounding power is more nearly proportional to the cube of velocity than the square. Increasing the velocity of a small caliber missile more than compensates for the reduced mass. So they're not factoring in weight here, but the point is velocity is extremely important because evidence shows that at common ranges, 22 caliber bullets can produce wounds of measurably greater severity than 30 cal bullets striking with the same velocity, providing that these velocities at the target are greater than a certain critical value. So wow, smaller bullet at the same speed is better than a bigger bullet? How does that work? Well, fragmentation. People mistake bullets for laser beams. They don't go forever, and they can break just like anything else. When the quote critical velocity is reached, the effect is greater. So from various sources, I got numbers all over the place for a 5.56. All sources agree that 2,700 feet per second and above would certainly do it. The lowest I could find with any reliability was around 2,150. So I've added the ballistics here, averaging common 55 and 62 grain bullets out of different barrel lengths. The 2,700 feet per second coded in dark green with shading across the range down to red at 2,150 and gray meaning no fragmentation. For the new shooters, the current standard barrel is around 16 inches. That's the second line there. You can see at 300 yards, a 16-inch barrel actually won't see fragmentation, but over the rest of the range, it's pretty well covered. The caliber developed matches the report very well. So a caveat to the more experienced guys, current trends are to shorten barrels. It's what the Special Forces guys use, so that makes it cool and everyone wants it. But why does SF use shortened barrels? They have to. They're getting in and out of confined spaces like vehicles and helicopters. They're clearing room to room, working teams, trying not to muzzle each other. So if you want an SBR or to shorten your barrel with a pin and weld to 14 inches, fine. Just be aware what it's doing to your fragmentation range. SF would use longer barrels if it fit their mission. As a home defender, you should consider your necessity to clear rooms. If you have kids in other parts of the house, then maybe you do need a short barrel so you can move around better. Otherwise, stick with all the length you can to get that one-shot stop. At 30 yards, any length should do well, but in life or death, I want the best I can get. So here they detail with the weight reduction and performance improvement versus the full 30 cal, they expect a 2.5 increase in kills. Specifically, low recoil effects offered would be reflected in improved skill in the use of the weapon by allowing a higher fire rate of single round fire. Such weapons would also be much less fatiguing to handle. This one is mostly a counter argument to the people who are still mad about being told they aren't accurate. They'll argue that this report is from 1952, things have changed. Then they'll talk about how great their AR from 1956 is. Regardless, it's fascinating to me that this report had such bearing on the future. We've already seen the caliber prediction we're about to see burst. But remember, in 1952, no rifles are currently issued with a muzzle device. Despite that, the report accurately states the low recoil of small caliber rifle offers a chance to employ a muzzle compensator with significant effects. Since then, almost every issued rifle has come with at least a flash hider. The civilian market has exploded with $100 plus comps, brakes, blast forwarding devices, etc. So as we're seeing weight decrease with caliber, barrels also follow. Cartridge powder tech increases, allowing for faster burn rates and higher velocity from less barrel. After World War II, an appreciation for urban warfare was gained. Like I said with SF today, there are benefits to rifles that are shorter overall, and barrel length is a quick way to do this. Again, I've also shared some color around the muzzle velocity for popular 223 5.56 rounds versus barrel length. Longer is still better for ballistics. It used to be assumed that shorter barrels couldn't be accurate, so let's hit on accuracy again to rub it into the guys that still think they're shooting MOA in a firefight. It was found in combat, hits from bullets are incurred by the body at random. Regional distribution of bullet hits was the same as for fragment missiles, which unlike the bullet are not aimed. The rifle bullet is not actually better directed towards vulnerable parts of the body. Need to extend the study of present highly accurate precision-made rifle as a general purpose infantry weapon. Then they go on to state that snipers do still have a place, don't worry about that sniper. So in this test, they take 16 of their best and 16 of their worst riflemen, have them shoot drills in different scenarios ranging from simple to timed to stressed or even group exercises. It was found that best results were obtained when single rounds were fired on an individual basis at static targets. Marksmanship declined when group firing was performed. With slight psychological load, a further decline in effectiveness was noted. Hit probability is high for both grades at ranges up to 100 yards. At ranges beyond 100 yards, a sharp decline in hit probability occurs, and this decline in effectiveness is most marked between 100 and 300 yards. At 500 yards, both experts and marksmen perform unsatisfactorily, a performance quite inconsistent with the design capability of the weapon. So here we have a chart showing the decline in accuracy over distance. The difference between expert riflemen and marksmen may not be meaningful in actual combat. In rapid fire tests using targets randomly presented, the marksmanship of experts declined significantly. The same comparison for marksmen showed that the rapid fire test did not significantly affect their performance. What that shows is that we all have this innate level of ability, and training can get us much better when we're calm and able to apply the fundamentals we learn. But when SHTF, we all revert to around the same level. Of course, this isn't perfectly true. All people perform differently, and training absolutely has benefits. But as a rule of thumb, your accuracy is way less than the rifle, especially when shooting under stress. Under the rigorous conditions of combat, only slight differences exist in marksmanship. At all common ranges, weapon errors are without significance. Considerable discrepancy exists between the accuracy of the weapon and that of the rifleman. The dispersion of the weapon could be more than doubled without materially affecting the probability of hitting the target. Weapons design standards which seek perfection by making the rifle more accurate would not be reflected in improved marksmanship. Such high standards of precision are not supported as genuine military requirements. Okay, we get it. I don't care if you get it. I want to pound it into your head. Save your money on MOA, spend it on training. So speaking of training, super interesting. Considerable improvements are needed if skills are to approximate the precision capabilities of the rifle. Current basic training shows 76 hours are allowed for marksmanship training with the rifle, of which only 48 hours are involved in actual range firing of the weapon. Oh, I can hear the MOA crowd roaring. These shooters weren't trained. They're inexperienced. They suck. I'm way better. So let's look at that. I ran the cheapest scenario I could come up with to get you 48 hours of training, and it costs a minimum of $433 to get that 48 hours. And that's just you shooting alone. The cost of military grade instructors are not factored in here. I also ran the most expensive scenario I could come up with. Nearly $7,000. But okay, let's put cost aside and just look at time. If you went an hour a day, every single day, it would still take you 7 weeks to complete your 48 hours. If you went once per month, it would take you 4 years. So does 48 hours still sound like it isn't a lot? Save your money on the gun, pay for good professional trainers. Look online for classes from reputable or famous names. I've done classes at the local range from the local trainer, and sometimes they're good. Sometimes they're a waste of money. Don't risk it. Pay the higher dollar, get reputable trainers. Errors in aiming have been found to be greatest single factor contributing to the lack of effectiveness of the manned rifle system. The ORO gravely doubts that any attempt at development of skills through training which would begin to approach the accuracy of the weapon itself. To reach truly proficient standards in marksmanship, the time required in training would greatly exceed the practical limits imposed on the Army training schedules by needs of mobilization. So again, they're saying that by the standards of a 1950s rack grade M1 with old ammo, the gun is still more accurate than the shooter. So with manufacturing, engineering, and ammunition continuing to progress, rifles are now more accurate than anyone back then could have dreamed of. So they would have laughed at us for this infinite pursuit of single hole accuracy. From here, the ORO goes on to suggest burst fire as a way to increase hit probability. We know this came to be, at least during Vietnam. Not less than 4 rounds would be required to form a symmetrical pattern, diamond-shaped, around the point of aim, which would tend to maximize hit probability on the human target shape. The best design is one using a 4-round salvo with 20-inch spacing among the rounds at 300-yard range. A 4-round salvo of 20-inch spacing at 300 yards would more than double hit effectiveness at this distance. The marked decrease in hit probability occurring between 100 and 300 yards suggests a significant improvement in effectiveness at these ranges cannot be achieved by increasing the ballistic accuracy of the weapon. Aiming errors are too great to be compensated by any improvement in the accuracy of the rifle alone. So, thanks to the Pythagorean theorem, good old a squared plus b squared equals c squared, we can find that a diamond with 20-inch spacing is actually a 28.3-inch group. So do the math with me. 300 divided by 3 is 100 yards. 28.3 divided by 3 is 9.4. They are suggesting a gun with 9.4 MOA will be the most effective from 0 to 300 yards. That's why I'm telling you to quit worrying about accuracy. Some of the least accurate semi-autos still around today can achieve 5, 6 MOA. So this also tells you why firearms like the AK, which is notorious for its inaccuracy, quote, quote, still stick around in top militaries like Russia today. Cue the angry AK guys and all their 1 MOA stories. Okay, so reality check again. As promised, I have the data on home sizes. I'm not going to read all this to you, but you can pause and read it if you want. I took some of the largest homes' average room dimensions and used the Pythagorean theorem again to find the longest possible shot in each, which would be corner to corner. So we then line up this theoretical Hail Mary, longest possible at-home shot. Imagine it. You're in the garage, just finishing reloading your gun after cleaning it, when bam, someone kicks in the front door of your house with a crazy weird layout where rooms only connect in corners. You shoot from the back corner of the garage, across your large custom living room, across the large foyer to hit the home invader at a grand total of 29 yards. Sometimes math does weird things, so I ran it again. And this time, you're shooting from the second story down to the first story. I guess you're Jay Leno and you have a 2-story garage with a clear line of sight or something. I don't know. Either way, that only adds 3 yards for a total of a 32-yard shot. So if we take the suggested 9.4 MOA and shoot it at 32 yards, we get a 3-inch group. Perfectly satisfactory for home defense. Now, for the SHTF crowd, envisioning 28 days later, I am legend. Ask yourself how far you're willing to engage someone if you're alone, because unless you're part of a militia, it might be better to run than risk the firefight or alert others to your presence. So even if you can come up with a scenario to shoot 300 yards, it still may be better not to. So we've reached the end of the ORO report and its conclusions. What can we learn? You won't shoot past 300 yards, so zero your gun accordingly. You're less accurate than any gun. Spend money on training rather than MOA. Don't sweat the full auto thing. It only works in the movies. Don't worry about caliber. The standard offering exists for a reason. And finally, a super interesting part I definitely glossed over. The ORO was researching how to increase lethality. There were no limits on how to accomplish that, other than that it had to be a hand weapon for the infantry. That's why they can come up with crazy ideas like a gun that shoots a perfect diamond shape around a point of aim. They also considered using poison bullets. If they're willing to consider poison, trust they considered everything else first. So, no surprise, the current standard for the US, at least, is the M16 M4 AR-15 platform. It's great at almost everything, but space constraints leave the shooter scrunched up. We see here sharp angles at the elbow and wrist, which are uncomfortable over time and deplete control. If you notice, this soldier has extended his buttstock all the way to help alleviate that issue, but what he actually did was create a new one. The red box here is where the primary mass and weight of the rifle are. The blue box is where humans can best handle that weight, between the shoulders and hips, as close into the body as possible. If you want to test this, try and hold something heavy with your arms out parallel to the ground, fully extended. Now pull the object closer into your chest. Feel how much easier it got to hold it when it was at your chest instead of at full extension? This is ergonomics. So unfortunately, not all tech advances at the same speed. We're now introducing lights, lasers, forward grips, suppressors, all adding weight to the furthest part of the gun from us. This weight slows the gun coming up from low ready, causes over travel when swinging between targets or down from high ready or high port. You've seen shooters move to the C-clamp grip in recent years to help combat this. So looked at with the boxes again, you can see this has moved the mass almost 100% outside of the blue control box. So what's the next step? What is the next major game changer like semi-auto was to bolt guns, polymers were to wood, or smaller, faster calibers were to old battle rifles? Bullpups are the future. They are highlighted in this slide and seem to be the new trend. So what is a bullpup? Here's a picture of a rifle from General Dynamics. It's currently competing and progressing successfully through several rounds for the contract for the next primary issue rifle of our military. A bullpup like this one moves the magazine to the back of the gun, high in the shooter's hand instead of in front of it. This means the chamber can move back, the barrel can move back, the entire overall size of the gun is compacted. So it shrinks the overall size but keeps barrel length, critical to that critical velocity, the same. So on a side note, I thought this was interesting. Look at the suppressor here. They've increased the diameter to shorten the overall length while keeping the same volume. This is genius. I love when rifle parts truly work as a system to all accomplish the same goal. So you can see that the bullpup increases the length of pull. That's that critical distance from the shoulder to the hand that causes those painful angles. One of the knocks against bullpups is that the length of pull isn't adjustable. It's sort of true. One can always add butt pads to lengthen the pull, though it can't be shortened. It would take an atypically small shooter to have issue with the length. This is where people mention plates, body armor. First off, you're not going to be wearing this in the home. It's too expensive. It takes up space when you're not using it. It takes time to put it on in the middle of the night. Even so, you should still be able to reach and use the weapon with plates. It works for 7 of the 20 top militaries in the world just fine. Anyways, I superimposed red angles from the M4 we previously looked at here, so you can see they're harsher than the ones provided by the bullpup. In defense of the M4, there's a lot of grips on the market now with a shallower angle to help reduce the torque on the shooter's wrist. But for the first-time gun owner, they aren't wanting to research, buy, and install a grip. So boxes again, you can see here that the weight is much more inside the blue control box with the more compact design. As I mentioned before, warfare is increasingly mechanized. One of the reasons we don't see police with rifles is the difficulty maneuvering them in and out of vehicles. The bullpup is much less of an issue in this area. So enough bullpup stuff. You're here to assess the best home defense gun. What should you buy? Honestly, unless you get something that just doesn't fire at all, it's pretty hard to go wrong. I tend to trust one of the rifles that has been adopted by multiple countries though. You have multiple schools of thought, uses, intentions, mistakes, good ideas, etc., all coming at that rifle. If it stays put, that says really good things about the design. For that reason, we should look at the AR pattern, the AK pattern, and the AUG. So, ground rules again. We're thinking of the first-time gun owner. They aren't interested in the gun as anything more than a tool. They want to buy one, not more. Have it work forever, and never think of it again or spend another dime on it. Fair enough. So what is our use case? Darkness. Bad guys that only want your stuff come in the day while you were at work. In the words of Kendrick Lamar, home invasion was persuasive. From 9 to 5, I know it's fake. Bad guys that want you come at night when they know you're home. We should expect darkness and have a good light to identify targets with. You don't want to hear a bump in the night and shoot your wife who went downstairs for a glass of water. Don't get wrapped up in all the light marketing. You don't have to spend $500. Get something that's easy on and off and attaches directly to the gun. Stay away from lasers. There's no evidence that they work as intimidation tools, and you should be using your sights anyways. We need simplicity of use. When this gun comes out, it'll be under the greatest of stress, especially for first-time owners. If they don't trust the gun, they won't keep it loaded. Or worse, if they confront the bad guy and can't get the gun off safe. If we are shooting someone, it damn well better be because our life is in danger shooter. If this is the case, we want a caliber that will stop the threat as quickly as possible. This typically means a rifle caliber. The key part of home defense is home. You will use this weapon indoors. This means cramped quarters where movement is difficult, and for this reason, most full-size shotguns would be out. Shooting will also cause flash, bang, concussion, temporary hearing loss, and other forms of disorientation, so a suppressor is an absolute must. Additionally, recovery after the fight is going to be important. Can you hear the officers entering your house? Can you hear where your family is? Can you hear that the guy you just shot has an accomplice downstairs? Most people are scared of suppressors because of the stigma Hollywood has created around them. It won't be whisper quiet. It'll still hurt your ears to shoot multiple shots indoors, but shooting without one will likely result in permanent hearing loss. A suppressor is non-negotiable. So why not a handgun? It's in the name, handgun. You only hold this thing in one place. A rifle is locked into your shoulder, left hand, right hand, and sheath. Handguns are difficult to shoot accurately without extensive training and have less stopping power because the magazine has to fit inside your hand. They also have less leverage to balance out the addition of a light and a suppressor. Shotguns are famed as home defense weapons. You can find ones with short barrels, but many are for sporting and will come with a 26 to 32 inch barrel. Way too big. The sights are usually a simple bead or fiber optic with no rear sight at all. Standard capacity is only 5 rounds, which has to be loaded one at a time through a gate that could be confusing for new owners. Proper buckshot or slugs, they have very high recoil, flash, and noise. While suppressors do exist for them, they're very rare and hardly battle proven. They typically don't have great from the factory options for mounting lights and optics. Again, the first time gun owner doesn't want to wrench on the gun. They want it ready to rock. Properly running a pump under stress is unlikely and short shucking frequent even among experienced shooters. I would go semi-auto if at all, and I hate the whole idea that racking the pump shotty is going to scare the bad guy off. If he's there at night, he's looking for trouble and you just gave your position away. Racking the pump also means you weren't loaded to begin with or just dumped a round out on the floor. One round in a 5-shot gun is 20%. Ouch. Additionally, you can make that exact same noise with any type of gun. It's not some magic pump thing. So let's talk AKs. They can be found relatively cheaply. There are ones that are 70 years old, ones that were made yesterday. They've fought in every part of the world and won. I've seen their barrels hammered, actions cleaned with motor oil, variants frozen solid and thawed out, and they all still work. Anywhere you go, you can find parts and accessories. That said, quality controls can be sketchy in some. Their reputation means that if you get a used one, someone may have thrashed it just because it could take the abuse. They typically don't come with rails for lights or red dots. Their barrels aren't bred to accept suppressors as easily as other models. They may come in a different thread pitch, complicating purchase and frustrating new owners. If you did suppress one, they're already overgassed, so there may be issues either with reliability or with comfort of shooting the rifle, increased recoil, gas in the face, etc. Since it isn't America's rifle, some parts and ammo can dry up during tariffs or COVID-19 type situations. The safety's in a difficult to reach position, as is the mag release. There's no last round bolt hold open. It just seems like a lot for a new gun owner to take on. Let me clearly state, this is not a bad choice. The AK is one of the most proven rifles on the planet, and I wouldn't fault you for picking one. Still, I do think there's better options. How about an AR? Ah, yes. The most famous gun in the US. It's been called a Barbie doll for men because of the massive industry of parts and accessories for it. It's a double-edged sword though, as crappy parts or bad ideas will still sell well in the market. Be careful what you buy. This gun is inherently accurate and has been battle proven over decades. The ergonomics are some of the best out there, though modification can be required in certain models to get it. They're available at any price, any barrel length. There's tons of good information on them as well as options to train with them. Everyone in the gun world is familiar with ARs. The buffer tube does force a certain overall length, and running short can crank on your wrist. It's a light gun, but that weight is forward and will only be worsened with lights and suppressors. You can buy a pistol brace or legally SBR your rifle to cope with length, but this is a trade-off. Pistol braces are illegal for now, but are in a gray zone. You do risk their being outlawed in certain jurisdictions. Even if not, you can imagine the prosecution harping on the brace as a loophole to the NFA in court after your defensive shooting. Even if you win in criminal court, you can still lose in civil court to the tune of thousands of dollars or more. SBRs are an option, but cutting the barrel hurts velocity, and you can't travel across state lines with an SBR without notifying the ATF in advance. Additionally, the waiting period could be anywhere from 3 to 20 months. That said, you will face the same waiting period for a suppressor. If you do go the SBR route, it's best to do both at once. So bullpups of the future, huh? Well, yeah, they're the newest design to reach a wide audience. The AUG has proven itself since the 70s and seen adoption by 3 of the top 20 armies. They get the close quarter size advantage while keeping the barrel long to hit hard. They have modern ergonomics and are quick in action. Unfortunately, they can be heavy, and since they're different, many trainers don't know how to handle them and don't want to learn them. Since they aren't widespread like the AK or AR, the accessories market is much smaller. The smaller market also contributes to more expensive rifles to begin with. Smaller production runs mean less economies of scale. The trigger being so far from the chamber means that linkages have to be used, and many bullpups have poor triggers. So let's say you want to look at an AR and get a little more specific. I compared 2 extremely common options from Ruger and Daniel Defense at what I would call fair price and mid to high price. The Daniel Defense is more than double the price of the Ruger and doesn't even come with sights. You get a 0.2 pound weight savings and a 2.5 pound lighter trigger. Reported accuracy is 0.2 MOA better, better. So DD has a great reputation for military grade quality. I own one and I love it. That said, are the gains really worth double? How about for AKs? So here we compare a Wasser 10 with an Arsenal SAM-7. In the AK world, this is as common as it gets to nearly top shelf or maybe one shelf down. Again, the price nearly doubles to make the jump. There are no tangible spec sheet differences otherwise. Arsenal, again, has a great reputation, and you might find one with a threaded barrel or Picatinny rails, which would be a game changer. In this case, between the reputation of Arsenal and the risk of a used and abused Wasser, if you could find a railed version, I would say it is worth double. So the AUG is the AUG. I had to pull in the Tavor X95 for a competitor to it. So originally designed as the SAR in the 90s, this new gun comes from Israel. Ever hear the phrase peace in the Middle East? Israel has been in the middle of that chaos since we have been recording history. This nation has been constantly at war and under threat of terror. They're forward-looking. They've used M4s as well as AKs. They took design elements from both and from the AUG. It's the best competitor to the AUG here. Prices are similar and on par with higher end ARs or AKs. The AUG often comes with a 1.5 times sight or top rail. The X95 comes with iron sights built into the rail that have a tritium dot for night use. The AUG is famous for pretty extreme 1 MOA accuracy despite a very heavy trigger. For the record, this is because the military AUG uses a two-stage trigger where the first part of the press will fire a single shot, but pulling further back will make the gun go full auto without the operator having to flip a selector switch. This is an interesting design, but the trigger has to be heavy, so adrenaline-filled soldiers don't pull full auto when they only meant to shoot semi. Either way, the X95 has a trigger to rival the ARs. So let's stack up all 6 rifles and find the one for you. Sound good? I'll color code each on a scale, with green being more favorable to the buyer and red being less favorable. If price is an issue, look at the Wasser 10 or the Ruger. You'll need a thicker wallet to look at the other 4. Overall length sees the Bullpups take the lead. Everything else is around 10 inches longer. I know, don't say it. For weight, we see a nice advantage in the ARs. This will be key once we start adding lights and suppressors. Trigger is a little tricky. Some people are snobs about them. You can train to anything, but in general, lighter is better. The more force it takes you to pull the trigger, the more likely you are to shake or flinch as you pull, or to pull past the point when the hammer releases and jerk your shot off target. This one is interesting. AKs stay in the middle of the pack. For the AR and the Bullpup, each one has one great and one poor. Sighting options are important if you plan on aiming, which you should. Everyone gives you something but the Daniel defense. The thought here is that anyone buying a DD will want to buy their own optic or backups anyways, so they're actually saving you money on something you didn't want from them in the first place. For the first-time gun owner though, I don't think they want that. They want out-of-box readiness. The X95 gives you night sights, which is a plus. The AUG has you completely set. For most guns, if it's in the budget later, I'd recommend a red dot. They're simple to shoot and work day or night. Picatinny rails are how you mount lights, lasers, grips, sights, anything to your gun. The more you have, the more you can tailor your gun to fit you. The DD and X95 lead here with the AKs way in back. Accuracy, as we talked about, you really shouldn't read too much into this one, but here the AUG win and the Wasser 10 loses. Safety is a major fact. Safety is always number one, but this affects the shooter's mind and their trust of the weapon. I think the AKs and the AUG are really lacking here. Only the DD provides true A&B thumb switch. It's nice, but is it worth $850? The charging handle is used in loading and unloading. It isn't crazy critical for home defense, but it can be useful when training malfunctions. It also speaks to the overall designer's thought about the operator and how the gun would be used. Only the Bullpups get this right in my opinion. You don't want to take your shooting hand off fire controls, trigger, and safety, so the AK's right side only won't work. The AR fixed this by putting the charging handle on top of the receiver, but this means you basically have to take the rifle out of your shoulder for charging. Not a huge deal, but there's better options. Only about 10% of people are left-handed, so this one isn't major, unless you're left-handed. Then it's huge. You don't want hot brass hitting you, flying across your vision, or causing other distractions. Additionally, a lot of gunshot noise and gas come out of the ejection port. You don't want that coming directly in your face if you can help it. Only the Bullpups allow this swap. The mag release has all the same right and left issues as anything else. This one boils down to paddle versus button. Buttons will always be faster because they let the shooter multitask. Extremely unlikely you'd ever need to use this in home defense, but for training it's nice to have. Also, do you want the gun that was designed with everything in mind? If you're gonna bet your life on it, I'd think so. Sling hardly even bears mention. If you want to take classes, having a sling is nice, and the AKs don't offer that as readily. They absolutely have slings, just not as modular. Ew, I hate that word. Beware of manufacturers selling you quote modular things or caliber change things. They claim it's mil spec and cool, but it's really just a way to sell you more. Unless you have a definite need for that specific flexibility, don't waste your money on any kind of modular gimmick. Design year, just food for thought. Things tend to get better over time. Later designs can steal good ideas from earlier ones, and improve them. The Bullpups have it, the AKs don't. Now that we've covered everything, let's start killing off some options. We haven't touched capacity, barrel, or twist. For all intents and purposes, these are the same across all 6. Delete. Just looking down each column for color, the Ruger has less green than the DD, and the $800 Wasser can't compete with a $1,600 AR, so delete. If price is an issue, I think more doors are open to you with an AR than an AK, so I'd go with the Ruger. But that is here in the US, and you would still do fine with the Wasser. Just consider your light or suppressor solution when you make your choice. I beat you to death on how accuracy doesn't matter from the gun, and how 9.4 MOA is acceptable. The worst of these is 3 times more accurate than that, so that line's getting deleted. At this point, looking down the columns, the Arsenal AK just has too much red to hang in there. Delete. So hard to kill more at this point, but the AUG is the most expensive rifle, has the same red and more yellow than the AR, and in its own class, the X95 has more green. So how do we pick between the last two? We throw out sights and price. The DD not having sights requires their purchase and brings the prices in line. Delete. So highlighting wins. The X95 is where I'd put my money. It has the shorter overall length for working in your home. It's heavier, but you aren't carrying this for hours like a soldier would. The trigger is better. The mounting options are the same. It does have a single-sided safety, which can be swapped instead of the true ambi like the DD. That said, once you set it, you shouldn't have to change it. All of the other ergonomics are better than the AR. The design is 47 years newer. It's been fielded in modern conflicts with great success. You can't go wrong with anything we've talked about today, but this one would be a very, very good start. Out of the box, you have an ambi rifle with night sights. In order as you can afford them, I would add a light first because you can't shoot what you can't see. Then start your suppressor process. This will take months to finish, and I can't emphasize enough how the impact of shooting uncorked indoors would be terrible. Finally, get a quality red dot. Look at something with good battery life that won't automatically turn off after a period of time. You need your red dot on 100% of the time to always be ready. And here come the Bullpup haters, very offended AR owners, angry AK guys. I get it. You spent $2,000 on a rifle and you don't want to hear there were better options. So let's debunk the most common Bullpup myths. First, they say you can't transition shoulders with it. If you can't shoot past 100 yards with your good shoulder, why would you transition to the one you don't even train with? Nobody that's a civilian has this level of training. Practically nobody. The weight thing. You aren't a soldier in the field. If you have a defensive encounter, it's far more likely to last seconds than hours. Furthermore, the better weight balance of the Bullpup leaves it easier to handle. It can be done for longer than with the lighter but less balanced AR. It also makes it feasible to aim and shoot the rifle with one hand while opening a door, holding a child's hand, or calling 911. The modern C-clamp grip used when shooting ARs was developed specifically to cope with the weight-forward balance. While this still helps with a Bullpup, it isn't as necessary in the same way it is with an AR. Bullpup triggers suck. Again, the AUG was designed to work differently, and you haven't felt the X95 trigger. Let me roll in some trigger ghosting of my X95 and my DD. You'll see the DD is better, but it is not far off. It's definitely not worth changing your purchase decision over. The accuracy thing again. 1, it doesn't matter. 2, the AUG proves it's not a Bullpup thing. Next, they argue that reloads and malfunction clearance is faster on an AR. So again, I'm really not a pro. I'm actually pretty bad at this, but I'm going to try and show myself doing reloads and malfunction clearance on each just to show you that they're super similar in timing. Anyone who spends equal time on both platforms will see they're the same. One's not faster or slower. And then finally, they argue that you can't shoot a Bullpup prone. First off, for home defense discussion, you're unlikely to lay down. Second, these rifles all use Stanag magazines, which means they come the same height off the ground. Your body has to be in the same position regardless of where the mag is. If a Bullpup feels awkward, it's because it forces you to support the front end of the rifle, which you should definitely be doing with your AR anyways. Think about it this way. The AR has been the most popular, studied, and supported rifle of the last 64 years. In just 17 years, with no real support from the civilian market, the X95 rivals the AR-15 very, very well. Any quirks can be worked out through engineering and time. We just need more people buying Bullpups to show these companies that the development is worth their time. I think the main issue here is that we all love the AR-15. We trust it. We don't want to cheat on it. And if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But nothing ever improves if you don't fix things that ain't broke. Most of the resistance here comes from not wanting to abandon the AR, not wanting to learn something new. Learning new skills or ways of working is challenging and uncomfortable. That's why much of the older generation alive today has refused to learn computers. We saw similar pushback with the police when Glocks first hit the market. Officers didn't trust a dinky plastic gun. They didn't trust semi-auto actions that could malfunction. They just liked the 38s they already had, loved, and trusted. Now you can hardly find a cop today that doesn't run a Glock or Glock clone. Don't run a 38, guys. Don't miss out on computers. Buy a Bullpup. Even if you disagree, I hope this was at least helpful in letting you think about guns and the purchase decision differently than you did before. While I'm not interested in your personal story or argument, I do like good data. If you have good data, please paste links below. I love learning new things. So if you think I'm wrong, don't yell. Teach me. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe, like the video.